new, it depends on what the sample is, because our samples are construction samples too. So they might take 2 days to make. And, when we're doing a big project, that's a totally a worthwhile investment. And on those samples, I'm like, I just want that one back.
But we have two different levels of samples. Like, we have our huge sample library where we'll bring it, and we don't mind leaving those behind with people. If the designer's like, oh, can I show this to the client? Can I show that? We'll be like, yes, please take them. But often, as part of our quotes, our estimates will include full, real construction samples. We'll lay it out in our estimates that we will make a construction sample, we will make a finished sample. We're going to work through the design process, and in the end, we will come up with the final sample. So it's rolled in, we assume that that's part of the process, and we lay it out as part of our estimate.
And it's just baked into our operating cost. That is, our work is so special that they need to see a sample. We're not going to get the job unless they see a sample in front of them, and that's really, and so, yeah, it's just to us, a cost of doing business, and how we approach it is different. So, like, yeah, our great clients that we work with all the time, I'll totally spend 2 or 3 days and make something and send it to them and hope I get it back at the end of the project. But I'm not gonna worry if I don't. And it's more of the ones that we've never worked with before. I'll give them something small, and then if they want something more, then I might bill for it. But I never am able to bill for the amount of actual time that it takes to do it. It's more just a nominal thing to make them think about. And usually it's more like a core charge that I'll bill it, but then it gets returned if they return the sample.
Go ahead. Designers have our samples in their offices. And, we want clients to go into these design offices and be like, what is that? And pick it up and be like, oh my God, this is so heavy. This is so cool. And they're like, oh, that's Whetstone.
So I have a similar answer to you about charging for samples. It depends, right? And a lot of times, if it's a client we've never worked with and we have a lot of leverage in the situation, like, yeah, we're definitely charging for samples. It's not uncommon to charge $150 for a sample of a paint, a gloss. If you say you're like, I want these 2 colors. I want to see a full scale mock-up of sprayed out glass of these 2 colors of fine paints in high gloss. And so if we have not signed a project yet, that's $150 a piece.
Yeah.
And because I have to go buy a $60 0.5 liter thing of paint, I have to spend the time, I have to make it, and I want to see that you're the real deal. But if we just sold a $30,000 gloss room, we'll include 3 or 4 color samples in that as part of it, right? The question becomes, I just got an email today from a big designer in New York who has a big hotel in Boston they're building, and they want a bunch of copper on a bunch of moldings and hardwood floors and handrails. And they're like, yeah, we want 6 samples of copper, and we want 6 samples of oil rub bronze. And I'm like, all right. At this point, I don't have a lot of leverage. If they love these samples, it's a huge job. I'm just going to eat the cost of doing these samples, and I'm going to send them out. And like,
yeah, you got to take each project.
Good karma.
It's a marketing expense. It's just like anything else. It's a marketing expense, and sometimes you need to eat that cost to get in front of the people. And if you send those samples, you put up
you definitely won't get the job.
Fuss about it, you're not going to get the job.
If I go, sure, it's X, like, that's just, we're talking about a big project.
Yeah.
Large dollars.
Yeah. And they don't.
I'm going to start off with nickel and diming them?
They don't want to hear that. And they're saying if you're going after a project like that, which I'm assuming is a lot of money, and you're worried about $400 sample, you're the wrong contractor for that project. That's just not who they want to deal with. And you have to even, I mean, that $400 means a lot to everybody at this scale, but you gotta just fake it till you make it, you know?
Yes.
And like, you gotta present it to where it's not a big deal to get in. Cause that's,
Yeah.
you're quoting a job like that. They don't want a liability of a company who can't absorb that cost. And so if that's the scale you're at, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't present yourself that way.
And it also means that as a company, I better run a company with margins that are wide enough and high enough that I can afford to do those things. If I'm pinching pennies everywhere and I have no money in the bank and every time I do a job I don't make any money, I'll never be able to go to that next level and get that type of work.
But it's a calculated risk. I mean, when we started, that is how we got the work. We just took the time, we made those samples and sent them out and just hoped that netted us the job. And that was a risk. I mean, if I didn't get the job, it's not like I was going to be doing something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so it was kind of like it didn't matter.
We actually got an email from old clients that we had at the very, very beginning, probably like 7 years ago. And we went to the Architectural Digest Home Show in New York, the big trade show. And I went through the list of people who were showing there very methodically. We found the furniture designers that we thought would be interested in metalwork. And Isaac made a full-scale mock-up of one of their complicated wooden tables in metal. And we brought it. He just, like, brought it into the trade show and popped it down and was like, hey, have you ever thought about having us make your furniture in metal?
You know, they weren't doing any metal work. And I was like, well, if I'm looking for, you know. And so we sold them on an idea they had no concept of before by providing them that sample. And we didn't even know who they were. And like, but samples are everything, man. I mean, we love samples. They're where it's at for sure.
And that's like, I love that story. And that is the entrepreneurial spirit. That is the passion for craftsmanship. That's like everything wrapped up into one right there. Like if you found success, and it's not a surprise when I hear a story like that, like going so above and beyond. And anytime you look at successful people in business, like they didn't just follow some like cookie cutter, like you do A, B, and C, and then you get to be successful and have a company where you get to do the stuff you want to do. No, you take big risks and you try stuff and you keep trying stuff. And if it means making a bunch of samples, man, like you said, like what else am I going to do?
Yeah, at that point, if you're, you know, and so samples are totally where it's at. I love samples. I mean, it's my favorite. I wish I could just make samples all day long. Like that would be, and that's all I had to do. I'd be very happy.
Yeah. We need to organize them better.
Yeah.
That is my number one of the things I'm going to be writing on the whiteboard tomorrow for our shop team is, and I thought it's like the third time I've talked about it on the podcast, but I need to be driving around in my truck. I thought about it again today with one of like all of the 6 basic finishes that we always do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they need to be in my truck. And
2 of them. You need 2 so that when you find the person, you can drop one off with them.
That's a good point.
You need 2 sets.
Well, I need to have one with me at all times.
Yeah.
And we need to have a stock of them at the shop.
Yeah, when we're making small samples, you know, pretty basic finished samples, we're making 6 or 10. And we're giving one away, we're keeping one for the project, but then we're keeping 2 or 3 for our library to have, because it's a lot easier to make 10 once than to make 1 10 times.
And that's what we've been talking about at the shop. It's like, we're going to get this product out and we're going to do this process. Like, have 6 sample boards ready to spray out while you do this, and we'll just have them.
Yeah.
Paint Finisher said, don't give them away. I think you're missing the point here. Sometimes we want to give them away. We want to put our work out into the world.
I mean, just who your client is. I mean, don't give them away to somebody who's not gonna use them. Give them away to a designer, and maybe they're not going to use them for that job, but they need to see them on their desk to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, don't give it to the homeowner for a house that you're not painting that at all, and they're going to just throw them away in 6 months after the project's over. You know,
And
like,
I think a key piece of this is like, I mean, what's your average job size roughly?
for a dollar amount,
Yeah.
I'd say probably 40, 50 grand.
Yeah. Now we're talking about projects where you could be, you know, $100,000 of metal is not a crazy thing,
No, not at
right?
all.
And so in this case, giving some samples away to get $100,000 job is fine. If you're a paint contractor doing your average job size is $900, yeah, spending a ton of time and money giving a bunch of stuff away to try to recoup that on a job with a smaller ticket.
What is your sample on a $900 job?
Well, that's a good point. But I don't know if samples sell $900 jobs very often.
You know, like, I mean, they just want to know the color.
Yeah.
At that, right? And I think it's all a calculated risk on all of it. Like you're sizing up who you're working for, and you're deciding, is this a worthwhile investment on my part, you know? And that's what I was saying is like, you give that sample to the designer who's what their job every day is to pick paint colors and paint finishes, is a much better use of that sample than to give it away to, you know, just a person that you're doing that $900 job for if they're not going to use it.
And I think a lot of what I wanted this podcast to sort of teach people is like, here are the things to think about as we try to get into the higher end market, right? Like, yeah. If I'm trying to I talk to a lot of people and they're like, how do we get to the next level? Well, I think a couple of things we've gone over so far is prolific sampling of special high quality product. Do the samples, give them out, have them handy. All I did in the beginning was just make samples and try to give them out to anyone who would listen. Because again, I had nothing to do but make the samples at all the time. And then the other thing is talk to the designers and the architects in a way that is on what they want to talk about and about how things will look and feel and the implications of the finish to the total picture, not as much about the details of how you got there.
Yeah.
Unless they ask.
I have a silly question. Does the Fine Paints of Europe, can you buy a paint swatch from them like you can with other paints? Do they provide that? Or
no. If you want an actual color sample of Holland, the gloss, say, in X color, the cheapest you can buy is a $50 little 0.5 liter container.
Yeah, they're like swatch your own color.
Yeah. Yep. So
I mean, that's great. That's very exclusive.
So one of your painters needs to start making sample chips. Start selling,
the color. Yeah, that's actually a great idea. We could probably start a business.
Just start selling sample chips so you don't, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. You could do a bit, but I think so. The client wants to go with the navy. In order to sell the job for a navy gloss ceiling, I need to have a dark colored gloss sample on me at the time I meet with the client. I don't need to have the shade of navy they were thinking of, and I don't need to make them that shade of navy until we sell the job. But if I can show them a dark colored gloss sample and say, this is what you will have on your wall or your ceiling or your door, that is what we need. That's what we're talking about having, right? Something to touch and feel that can give them an idea of what they're going to get.
Yeah.
You know, and then when we actually sell if I sell a door to a client for $5,000 or $6,000 to paint their door, I will gladly make them part of that price is a couple of samples to get them to the sheen, the color that they're after. right? We did a door in Beacon Hill. It was, it was an awesome opportunity for a client, and they were like, the client wants this type of a blue. Well, I was happy to go spend a couple $100 making those samples. I, out of pocket, without any signed contract, I made 2 samples, gave them to him, cost me a couple $100. That netted me a really profitable, awesome project. It got me into a world that I could never have gotten into otherwise. So that $200 to me was a calculated risk, kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I am very comfortable spending a couple $100 here, a couple $100 here. I'm much more concerned about bringing in like highly profitable projects than I am about pinching pennies along the way. And I think that's what's helped me, cost of doing business. That's what has helped me get to the higher and higher levels. Is you can't be like tit for tat looking at the world. It's like, just give awesomeness, and people will come find you.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and I can see how at odds that is if you're the kind of person that sits down and writes a business plan. And you're like, okay, I'm going to charge X amount and I'm going to get this much as profit. And at the end of the year, this is what I'll have, when really it's just war for several years. And you're just giving as much of yourself into it in a way as possible. And that's it. There's like, I always wonder about like people who write the business plan and then are able to like execute on that. And how different is that? Like, what business is that like versus, what your experience and our experience was, which is it's just tooth and nail for so long.
I think that I don't know of very many examples of getting into the ultra high end and the high end market from the business plan route. Maybe there's some people, and I'd love to meet them, who have done it that way.
Yeah.
But I think that the blueprint that's worked for me and what I've seen from others is what we're talking about. It is getting really good, giving way more value than you take back financially for a period of time until you can finally develop a reputation and then charge what it costs. I don't know of a faster way.
Just connections.
Yeah.
Connections. I mean, we, from RISD, I've known a lot of people who started furniture companies and kind of just went right from school right into high-end furniture and lighting businesses. And I think, they had pre-existing connections on how to sell that stuff. And as passionate as we are about what we do, to make money, it's more about the connections that you have and how you operate your business, because you can two people can both be working on the same project, and one may be incredibly skilled but terrible at marketing and can't get the word out, and another person may be amazing at marketing and just is on social media and kind of pushing out great photos and has a great website, but just doesn't have the skill, but they're getting those jobs because they're front and center and they're presenting. Once you have enough people who are presenting what is standard, it's kind of easy to dumb that down. That's a conversation Maria and I has had many times of metal is a pretty old trade, and that there's a lot of old skills involved. And what we're seeing, there's so many laser cut and water jet cut designs, and that has become the standard of what kind of metal furniture is, or metal architectural work, because that's what's easy to produce.
It's the aesthetic.
And it's turned into what that kind of modern metal aesthetic is. And the people, can design it on a computer, send it out to get water jet cut, powder coat it, and install it. And you do that enough times, that's what is desired, because that's what's presented on all of these platforms. And then it takes a different kind of person to kind of reintroduce different ways to produce things.
And that's an uphill battle.
Totally.
Yes.
You know?
Right?
Yeah. You know,
It's not the easiest thing.
Yeah.
But there must be some sick part of our brains that just love fighting against the tide.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm in a business of painting where more and more every day it's a price driven. How fast can you get a color on? It looks fine enough, and that's the standard now. If every house in the block has a crappy paint job, well, that becomes standard, and it's no longer crappy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the thing. And you have to really try incredibly hard to get past that, and you have to educate.
A lot of education
On like what is different. And
I actually had not thought about that, how when we put metal in, like it's hard to switch it out. Like you don't go into a room that has, you know, a curtain wall or a railing and say, oh, this season we're going to do something different in metal. But I imagine that a lot of designers treat paint that way. That, oh, we'll just freshen up the room. We'll just change this, you know, like paint is easy. And so you're fighting upstream of that kind of like fashion forward mentality where like color's so easy to do.
And HGTV told us it should be done in a day and it should be super cheap.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if we don't look at the details, if you've never seen what good looks like, you might be completely happy with subpar. You know, what I would call a poor paint job. If you've never seen a good one, you might not know. And
yeah, we deal with the same
we
thing.
deal with that
all
the time. There's so many just like iron railings that are just a totally different object than what we're offering. And it's like you can't compare it. It's just not like, and we will never be able to produce that at that price. Like that's just not, there's so much difference there that it's totally different.
It's not even the same. And I was talking with Rich today, and he couldn't, the timelines weren't lining up. The client was like, fine, I'll just call some company in Texas, and they'll make me at the door in a week and a half.
Oh, Jesus.
And then what shows up
is,
it's like, fine, if you didn't care about quality, why did you call me in the first place?
Yeah.
And yeah, I have to find clients who value what I offer.
Yes.
And, you know, some level of that can be taught. I can educate them on some level. But it's really nice. Like New York City, you go to New York City, the standard for painting at the high end is very high. They are expecting to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to paint their apartment, you know, at these high level things, because the standard everywhere is super high. So when they call a painter to paint their apartment, they're expecting some level of results, right? But if you come to like, some other town, someplace, if the standards aren't there, now it becomes a whole nother ballgame of how do I sell somebody on this quality? Yeah. And, you know, I think social media has been a very powerful way of doing that. Yeah. You know, we can show people what good looks like.
How much of your work is in Rhode Island? Like,
I would say 60-40. We're in Massachusetts now, more. I'm working really hard to shift that back to 60-40 the other way around. But I've been not having to fight the tide in Boston, right? Because the same thing I'm talking about, like there is a standard that's set in Boston they're already speccing the level of work that we do much more often, where I have to go sell them and push and then have literally no one in my market to compete with. Where that's why I like sharing all this stuff, and I like Instagram, and I like giving a lot of the secrets away, because if there's a couple guys who do what I do and they're out there doing it, I can only do so much work, and the standards go up. It's good for all of us. When I'm the only guy who produces anything even on my level, it becomes a lot harder.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. What about you? Where do you do your work, and how is it broken up
I mean, our work
geographically?
right now is split probably 30% Martha's Vineyard, 50% Boston, and then that other 20% is anywhere. you know, like we will go wherever the work is. We're certainly not afraid to travel because most of our work is done in the shop. But like we have had only 2 projects in Rhode Island, one at Brown University and one on the house on the east side that we met at. And that was it. In the 10 years we've been in business.
Is that how you guys met?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
I saw the most insane doors I had ever seen in real life be installed, and I was absolutely floored at those doors that you guys did in that bathroom that we did. And I was like, I've never seen anything like this. I didn't even know this existed. I need to know that. You guys were rock stars to me before I ever met you guys. I was like, I have to understand how this even gets done.
Were you
And
finished? I haven't been in since it was finished.
I haven't been in. I mean, they rushed us in for Christmas, and there's like temporary lighting in the house still, I think. And I talked to Michael today, though. We're working on a project on the east side together, but I haven't seen the whole thing like completely furnished and completely done. What an unbelievable project that was, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those were the only, so like we don't, our client, and I think it's because like there's certainly money in Rhode Island, but it's a different style. Their Newport, it's much more wrought iron and kind of much more traditional metalwork, which can be quite fancy and quite expensive, but it's just not the type of work we're producing at this point. We've done some forged projects and we do forgings, but we're just not a wrought iron shop, and so I think we're just not getting that type of work where our metal work falls in a much more modern flair, and there's just that more of that type of work in Boston and the Cape and the surrounding area.
There's a project in Newport for Behan. I should. Did you guys? It was a very modern design. We'll have to talk about it later.
Yeah.
That I just bid the painting on. That I feel like. Do you guys ever work with Mary Ann Thompson?
No, but I've definitely reached out to them. I don't think we've done a lunch and learn with them.
It's a very modern style. Yeah. I didn't look too deeply into the plans for the metalwork, but I bet you there's some crazy stuff. Yeah, the level of execution that you guys, the precision of every, like the miters on those doors, or how about just the way the door feels when you open the door and you're like, is this really something I'm feeling right now? This was made by somebody?
Yeah.
Because you guys made those hinges. You made everything on that, right?
We did everything, and we do everything. Like, it just started as raw.
Did you make the knob?
That was the one item we didn't make.
Okay.
That knob and the lock set. But we patinaed and refinished it. We did our own finish work.
But the level of execution was something that I was just like, oh, this is what Michael had told me. It was like, this is what we do with paint, you guys do with metal. And my God, it's until you've seen it, like you can't possibly comprehend.
It's like opening a bank vault and taking a shower in the bank vault.
You can't even believe it. I mean, and like to be the guy who has that bathroom, combined the level of craftsmanship that's in that bathroom, like it's crazy. You guys, you can see the door on the story that I posted for this thing is that door.
I think it's also our most recent post on Instagram. We put something on top of it to hire some.
Oh, yes. Their most recent post on Instagram.
Right. I'll add it to our stories right now so you can see it.
Yes. That door is ludicrous. And you need more pictures and more detail and more stuff like that so people can see all of those details of the where the miters meet, and like the level of execution is, it's mind numbing.
Thank you.
And
just time.
it's time, and it's clients, just like with what I do. It's time, and it's when you can have a client who has the budget to pay for the time, what psychos like you and I can actually make happen is amazing.
Yeah.
And we're so lucky to have clients. You know, I was talking with David Andriozzi, the architect, and he was calling them patrons, right? Like we have patrons.
Yeah.
That actually allow us to do the level of to execute at the level that they allow us to. So you mentioned that most of your work is in the shop. What percentage of the work versus is shop versus site, and how do you marry those two together?
I mean, I would say we're in the shop 90% of the time. You know, we go to the site, we take measurements, and we kind of figure out what conditions we want to work in. And then we're in the shop producing it, because to get that level of precision and fitment, you have to control every aspect of the project. And so, you know, there's no way that we can execute on site. You know, I'm amazed by carpenters and painters and people who can be on site and do that in such a confined space with so much restrictions. I despise site work. It's my absolute least favorite part of the job, but it's part, you know, it's the most important part. And so, yeah, so I'd say probably 10%.
And the site work that you were doing, it's install, pretty much only install?
Yeah.
And measurements.
Right now, that's kind of how we've set it up. Is it's just go at the beginning of the project, measure, and then go at the end and bolt the finished thing in. We're not doing too much assembly of finished components besides just like bolting things together. We're not doing any fabrication. You know, the way we've developed our process is just needing the control that I was talking about. And like, if we're doing a patina and we want all of that patina to match across the whole project, we need to know how we're going to manipulate that material, you know, and you don't get that flexibility on site. And so the only item I could see us really doing a ton of site work on is more like railings, because you have to do some fittings, but because I don't like site work, I don't go after railings. You know, that doesn't fit well with how I think and work, and so I don't go after that work. You know, the only time we do railings is when we build the stairs too.
So I love that, to that point.
Yeah.
The hyper focusing on what you do and saying no to everything else. And I mean, I think it's so important.
What we try to do, though, is say yes and then talk them into doing a metal stair.
I love that. To that point, keep going. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to do the railing. I just want to I started Whetstone because I like making things in a way that I want to make them. That's why I have my own business. And so I very much try to funnel our projects through how I want to do it. And I try not to present things that I don't want to do, because it will yield a better end object if I really want to do it and enjoy it.
Oh, you're such an artist. I love it. But I have the same thing in a way. Like we do similar things where it's like we're doing a brushed project right now. And honestly, I think I probably could have convinced the client to go brushed or sprayed. which one did I really want to do, right? And more, and it's because of what I would think the client wants. It's not like completely selfish. Like the client's gonna hate it, but I'll like it. Like it's not that, right?
No, it's figuring out what they want, but executing it in the way that you want to execute it. You know, like once you try to force things, it never ends up well. You know, it's just a bad fit, and like you're not going to get a good result when it's forced.
Do you remember how much those 2 doors cost on that bathroom? If you're comfortable sharing, you don't have to.
A lot.
Yeah, they were a lot.
Over or under 15,000?
Over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely over.
Over each?
Well, which 2? Because we did 2 showers in
I know. The ones in that picture,
The
the
double
two-toned, the double doors.
Each one was over 15,000.
Unbelievable. And when you spend that kind of money, you can feel it and you can see it.
It took us hundreds of hours to make. You know, like we're not wealthy. We just spend a lot of time doing what we do. You know, and
No, I get it.
It's an insane amount of money for what the object is, but it takes a lot of time. You know, and the materials we use are expensive. Like those 2 things combined net very expensive objects.
I'm really happy that I know I'm a snob, and I'm proud to be a snob. I love it. I like nice things, so I'm really happy that I touched those doors and I was like, oh, this is oh shit, like I've never seen anything like this, and because I'm a crafts person, I was just like I can't even imagine. So when you tell me that they cost $1 million, it doesn't surprise me. Something like that just has to. Like, how do you achieve that level of craftsmanship without, like you said, hundreds of hours?
And we didn't even make shop rate on those. Like the amount of time that actually into them, you know, it just.
This is the other strange tragedy.
You know, it just doesn't happen. But they're beautiful and lovely.
They're unbelievable. What? Oh man, there was something else I was gonna say. I lost my train of thought. Oh, my question to that point.
Yes.
So how does one go from no one's paying me to build things out of metal to someone's paying me over $15,000 to do a door? Like, what does that progression look like? If someone asked you, like, how do I get to do what you're doing, and let's say make shop rate doing it, even because next time you'll probably make shop rate on those stores, I hope.
I mean, we spent a solid 5 years of suffering and struggling, and it was
I'm so glad to hear that.
I mean, we just doubled down. I mean, it was more about making cool shit than it was about money at that time. We had much lower responsibilities. We didn't have a child. We didn't have a house. Like we had very low overhead, and it was just more about what can we get away with. And I still remember my very first project was a handrail that I sold for $550, and I sold it for $450, and it cost $550 in materials. And so I paid money to do it plus my time, but it was just like I had to do it. I just had to do that job to get another job, to get another job, to get another job, and I knew what type of work I wanted to do. You know, I was aware of what was out there and what was available. And I just turned every project into a project of that caliber because that's all that I wanted to do. And those first people got a lot for their money. And
that's exactly what my story is.
You know,
that's exactly how I did it.
Like I didn't do shitty handrails because that's not what I wanted to be doing. If you only had a budget for a shitty handrail and I needed the work, you got a really nice
You
handrail.
got an awesome handrail.
Oh, nice.
And that's what we did, you know, and it took a lot of time and a lot of money. And, you know, we got one really large project that kind of made us open our eyes for how we could charge and what kind of money was really out there. And that was a big shift, but that wasn't until like 6 or 7 years into our business.
2017.
You know, and it really, you know, like I still, like I quote a door out and I'm like, that's a ridiculous amount of money. But it's a ridiculous amount of money for me, but it's not a ridiculous amount of money for the project. And you need to not think of it in that way. You know, you need to think about it as this is a $10 million house that they're building. Your, you know, $100,000 paint job is a fraction of that. It's really not a lot of money at that point, even though $100,000 for a paint job is a lot of money, and you just have to kind of get over it.
Freaking crazy, but
you need to
but it's not about that.
You need to think about it at the level of your clients, not at your level.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, because yeah, and so, but yeah, to answer your question, it was just a lot of struggling and just perseverance of wanting to do a certain type of work and executing that type of work regardless of what the project actually was. And
it helps to be young and ignorant.
Yeah, like I don't think I could do what we did then now with my age and responsibility. Like I just would not want to put up with that shit. You know, so it's a lot harder. You know, when I was 24, it was a lot easier to work all the time and take home no money.
I feel you. I people ask me the same thing. I'm like, well, I think you could get to where we've gotten to slower if you wanted to take home a little more money. I don't think it's impossible, but I think the speed at which we were able to get to where we've gotten could only have been achieved by extreme sacrifice.
I mean,
I disagree with that.
It's a little bit of both.
I
feel like our business was cash starved for many years because we had to take some in order to pay our rent. And there were definitely stretches of periods when we didn't pay rent. But if we had been able to leave that money in the business and reinvest it, we could have grown a little bit faster. We could have, you know, made better investments. But to be so cash starved for so long, and maybe it's different with painting, but metalwork is very capital heavy. You need machinery, you need space, you need expensive materials. And if we had been able to keep more money in the business rather than starve it a little bit because we had to eat, maybe we would have grown a little faster. It's hard to know.
I just mean like by profit. If you were trying to be profitable at each job, you would have gotten here slower.
Yeah, you wouldn't have gotten anywhere with that mindset at the beginning.
Right? In the beginning with the mindset of I have to make my numbers. If I had budgets and if I was doing job costing, I never would have gotten here.
I don't think you can, because unless you can get catapulted into whatever realm you want to be in. But like if you're starting out and you're painting a whole house for $3-4 grand and you're making money on that $3,000 to $4,000 job, you're not gonna be able to, it's not gonna be a great execution, and you're not gonna have anything to show for moving forward. You know,
it's gonna. That's what that was my point. Is I think it would take a longer period of time making profit on every job to get into the high end market, as it would if you just took it on the chin and kept executing. You can get to the high end market quicker, but less profitable.
And I mean, and also, I mean, for us, there was a huge learning curve. Like, I had some pretty solid basic skills going into this, but a huge part of it was learning on each project. You know, like we had a production job in our first year that we were making workout equipment, and like we were doing these fillable barbells and dumbbells. And so I had to make these little threaded pucks that like you could put sand in to fill them up and seal it. And I knew that I had a Bridgeport, so I was doing them one at a time on a Bridgeport, and like it's drill, tap, countersink. Like it was a multi-step operation, and we're doing a couple hundred at a time. It took forever. I was like, oh, I need a multi-spindle drill press to do this. And so I started looking up that, because that was like my next logical thing. Like instead of one spindle to do 6 operations, I need 6 spindles to do 1 operation each. And I did that, and I was like, well, this isn't really great. I really need a lathe. But a lathe is back to that one spindle thing. And then I just did more research, and I was like, oh, a turret lathe. And like, these are all things that like, and then I searched out and found one of those. And so like, when I started that whole production process 6 months earlier, I had no idea what a multi-spindle drill press was, and I had no idea what a turret lathe was. But I had to go through each of those steps to get there. I mean, obviously, if I maybe worked in the industry for 10 or 15 years prior to starting my business, I would have been like, well, I should just start with the turret lathe. But I didn't have that information, so I had no other choice than to do it in an efficient manner and just work through it.
It's so crazy. That's everything you just described is like exactly my entire life.
Yeah. And
like just figuring it out, like banging your head against the wall over and over again.
I like it though. That is what I enjoy about my work, is
buying machines.
Yeah. Is figuring out a new reason to buy a machine.
Really light, really cheap machines too,
yeah.
right?
Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
New plastic components.
The size of equipment and the weight of the stuff that you guys bring into that shop is out of control.
Yeah, it gets out of hand sometimes.
Yeah.
And everything was made like pre-World War II, right?
Most of it, yeah, I'd say most of it's like World War II vintage, and then we have a few 60s and 70s machines and 1 or 2 new things, but most of it's pretty old. And like, we've constantly had, all of our equipment's manual, which we've had conversations about incorporating a CNC into our work, but like, we've found it's not really necessary. It's more that would help efficiency if we're doing more production or kind of more complex machined parts, but that takes away from the look that we're after a little bit. And we can still do complex machined parts, just maybe not quite as fast as a CNC. And so we've just bought old cheap things and kind of made those things work for what we need. There was, for probably the first 7 or 8 years, the most expensive piece of equipment we had was $1,000, and we had a lot of like $400 or $500 lathes in mills, and like
it was more expensive to move them than it was to buy.
I was gonna say all those pieces of equipment are like pool tables, right? They're giving them away, but then you have to spend $2,000 to set it up.
Rollers and jacks and things, and it just was. That's what was available in our budget, and we figured out, like I said, it was easier for me to buy 3 lathes and set them up for 3 different operations than have one CNC that costs 30 times as much that could do those 3 operations in one machine. And that's just how we've kind of managed through it and have changed and worked our design process through it.
It's my exact experience, and I think that's what people like see, like the end result now, and they're like, how could I ever get there? And it's like, dude, it was a long slog, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, bootstrapped approach to getting here. And if you work hard and you get a little bit better each day, like, you'll end up having a shop full of tools and an amazing body of work. But it's not something that happens overnight, and it's not something that happens by like playing it safe.
No, we never bought equipment and then looked for work. We always got the job, got our 50% deposit, and then went and found the piece of equipment that we needed to do it in that 50% deposit budget, whatever that was. And that is how our shop has grown. And like, so it has always been buy it after you need it.
That's what a smart old carpenter one time told me when I was making this box to steam window sashes in. And I was like making this, like, I was trying to build this elaborate box with the steam to like, and he told me, he was like, dude, he was a custom arch wood guy. And he was like, until you've made a temporary jig 3 or 4 times, don't invest in making a full scale jig. Like, that's built to last. He's like, and it was such a good like approach, like kind of piece it together a few times until you decide, you know what, I've done that the slow way 3 or 4 times. Now I'll go invest to do that efficiently.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And you know what you want and don't want out of it.
Yeah, I built dozens of, if not hundreds of temporary spray booths before I went and bought an actual spray booth. And I don't think, if I would have bought a spray booth originally, I never would have, but if I had, I would not have understood or appreciated, the value that it brought. But
Sure.
when you do it temporarily and then tear it down and spend all that time and energy wasted, but we didn't have any money and had plenty of time on my hands.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck else am I gonna do? I feel like so much of my career was like, what the heck else am I gonna do? I might as well, do whatever.
Get the job done.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone 2 hours, so I don't want to take you too much longer. But let's see. Let's see. We've gone through everything I want to talk about. Lessons learned. Let's talk about lessons learned before we get into the 3 questions. So what are like the biggest things if we haven't covered them already? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, it's a date night.
It is a date night.
Um,
So lessons learned, roll your podcast babysitter into a date night.
There we go.
and I think for me, a giant lesson that I have learned, that I'm learning and working towards, which goes against a lot of what we just talked about, is while I'm still 100% passionate about what I'm doing, you still need to build some boundaries to manage the rest of your life to make it all work. Like, I'm very fortunate. I have Maria, and she is 100% behind me, and I think it helps that she's at the shop and sees what we're going through every day. But like, I also know I need to put up more work boundaries to keep that relationship moving forward and to kind of manage that. And that's something I'm still learning, but I think is incredibly important for small businesses to be able to separate that a little bit, and you can just be a little bit more methodical about how you approach things. And I think COVID in some ways has kind of helped me with that, because it's been such a shit show that I haven't had as much room to just deal with things. Like, usually when we're experiencing a scheduling problem or a mistake in the shop, we can solve it by just pushing a little bit harder or a lot harder, and it kind of sucks, but you kind of work through it. But with just the way things have been going, we've been pushing really hard, and then a problem happens, and there's just no room for that to go anywhere. And so because of that, I've been like, oh, if I'm late, I'm already late. Like, and I'm going to kill myself, but that's going to just screw up everything. Like, I should go home and go to sleep. And so like that's a boundary that really became much more aware of in the last 6 months, 8 months, that I think you have to work through.
After 10 years, he's deciding he should go home and go to sleep.
That is awesome advice, and I know there's someone listening right now that's great advice for. So tremendous. But I think we learn those types of lessons from experience, and sometimes you have to hit your head on a wall enough times when it doesn't move. You're like, all right, maybe I should change. And or like the project that how many times, I don't know how many times has this happened to you guys, but I can't tell you, I'm so sick of false deadlines where I'll have like we just had a builder, and Thanksgiving's the deadline. We have to be in for Thanksgiving. We have to have the room done for Thanksgiving. Okay. I pull out all stops. I sprayed in the booth all day yesterday. I delivered we did 2 deliveries this morning. I'm such an idiot. But I sent my apprentice first thing this morning to deliver all the small pieces because I couldn't get there till like 10:30, 11. And then I took the big stuff at the trailer later in the day. I got there to deliver everything. Dude, nothing that we delivered had been touched, right?
Yeah.
This like absurd timeline that had been told to us was out the window. The knobs, the handles, this place is not going to be used for Thanksgiving. They're just going to put some stuff up, make it look decent, and come back.
Yeah.
But I moved mountains. Luckily, I didn't move too many mountains, but I moved enough that I was like a little frustrated, but also kind of, I wasn't, but I got home at 9:00 last night. Wasn't too late. And I didn't, like in this case, I didn't get to be the guy who made it go late. Like we crossed off, we did it. Like we win.
And
so like
good sometimes, and then you're done, and you can
but
move on to the next thing.
But they're also, probably individual to each project manager, right? Like some project managers, you're like anything you say there's like 80% truth there, and then you're embellishing the rest. And that is another big thing that we've learned through the years is each individual project manager, it's like, going on a blind date and you're getting to know them and you're like, all right, like what's real, what's not real, you have to deal with their personality and their work style, and it can really affect how the project goes.
Yeah. And it just comes with experience, and you do the best you can. But like you said, I love that, like having the boundaries. For many years, I would just throw more hours at a job endlessly, right? Because again, what the heck? But now
we still do.
But that's because, and I can't, because I'm not producing 99% of the work that we produce. And I can't look at my team and be like, guys, we're working Saturday and Sunday and we're doing 10, 12-hour days both days. Like, in an absurd circumstance, I probably have built up enough, like, emotional bank account dollars that I could, like, withdraw that, right? And bring in the team and we could rally. But I'm not even sure. But I would never do that. Because the price that costs my company way more than the hours I pay in labor. It costs us so much more for the future in morale and keeping people around. And now I care way more about the team of people that we have. And I don't have that ability to just throw more hours at it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And it has been huge. Once you take that away, like you said, once you put those boundaries there, now you have to change other things. But, it's still insanely stressful, and still I end up, but way less these days am I working, doing the work, or am I staying till 9:00 at night. Our weekends are still sacred for the most part. Sometimes they're not, but
that's great. No, it's good to hear it's possible.
It is. It's possible, but it's possible. It has to be. In my experience, it has to happen in order to attract the type of people that make for great team members of ZK Painting.
Yeah.
The type of guys who are like, let's do 70 hours and get a bunch of overtime. Those crazy people, they're not my ideal workforce. The people I want are the people who are going to come, love their work, give it everything for 40 hours, and then they want to go have their lives outside of work. And based off of just like supply and demand, and I've adjusted the way I run my company now because my employees mean more to me than anything now. Like it is Team ZK first, clients and work second. But that's been a shift that's taken a long time. But now it's like my top priority. But that's a great tip. The boundaries are huge.
Yeah. Hard.
It is
very,
hard.
very hard.
And again, Zach, it's very inspiring to hear your approach and the way that you're thinking about things. And it definitely gives Isaac and I a lot to think about, because often you're operating in a vacuum where you're like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the best way to do it? What's a different way to do it? And until you see someone model it, and like, it's really powerful to see it modeled.
I'm so glad to hear that. That's why I'm out here doing this thing, because I've learned from. I didn't come up with this stuff. Like, you learn from other people and you practice it, and we have a long ways to go, and we're far from perfect. But I think we're on to something. Now, my boundary, like you're saying, is more hours thrown at a job. I just don't promise deadlines very often, and when I do, they're like super conservative now. And like 3 weeks to do your door. Can I do the door in like 9 days? Probably, but I'm gonna say 3 weeks because now but now what that means is I have all of this built-in time to just throw extra hours over the budget at a job.
Yeah.
Those are the boundaries that I now need to put in place. Is like I just throw hours at jobs,
right,
and take it on the chin on the balance sheet, and don't look at the. I don't even have the login to my freaking QuickBooks Online. I have to when I meet with the accountant, I sign in and see it. Like it's terrible.
Yeah.
Solved one problem and created another.
Yeah, I just look at it as like lead dominoes. Like, what is the most important thing I can do in my business today? And first it was like build the reputation, and then it was build the team, and then it was get the work coming in. And I stayed afloat for all of that time. It was a miracle. But we stayed afloat financially. We don't have debt, and somehow we've stayed afloat. Now I can turn my attention to let's get efficient, let's get profitable.
Totally.
I don't know. I'm sure there's other ways to do it. It's the only way I know.
Then that's the way.
Yeah. All right. So now we have 3 questions that we do at the end of every episode. 2 of them are fun. 1 of them is not so fun.
Okay.
But that's all right.
You lead
We
with
have to.
fun one.
No, we end with the pain point.
Okay.
No, it's all fun. Don't worry. So the first question I have for you is, what is your favorite piece of metalworking paraphernalia? So, computer program, tool, piece of equipment. Like, what is your favorite? And you both can have separate answers.
Isaac is my favorite piece of metalworking.
Oh, very sweet.
That's tremendous. We've never had an answer like that.
Done. One stop shopping.
I think my turret lathe.
And so now we're going to need you to post a story tomorrow or later today with a picture of a turret lathe and let everyone know what the heck that is. I think I know what it is. I'm pretty sure it's that big, long, huge machine that but turret lathe, not everyone knows what a turret lathe is. No. So we're going to need some context.
Make some context for that.
Okay. All right. So the next question I have for you is a DIY tip for people who are doing metal work at home. These are usually paint questions and design questions. So, bear with me. I'm still surprised I haven't got a letter of an offer letter from you after doing some welding with you. I'm shocked that I don't have an offer letter from Whetstone.
I think the most important thing, DIY tip, is learn how to use a file. Because it's not fast, but it has the most control, and it is what kind of can allow you to take something that's pretty basic to something that's pretty special.
we're going to need to see some Instagram videos of a tutorial on file using.
Sure.
Because I don't quite know what you mean by that. I have a general idea, but I would love to see exactly what a file can do.
All right. Yeah.
We'll make a little quick cut.
Sure.
All in Premiere Rush.
That's right. Great.
And we're going to school everybody on filing.
Career Rush project. Promise.
Awesome. All right. Now, we've just communicated to everyone your amazing expertise and how awesome you guys are at running your business and doing unbelievable work. So now we need to pull you back down to reality, and we need to hear like your biggest horror story, most embarrassing moment. We've had people say things on this show that they've never said out loud before. I want to hear your like most embarrassing, like what keeps you up at night story.
All right, so I was making a stainless steel counter for a local architect. It was actually it was one of our first architectural projects we ever did, and it was a Rhode Island project. And I did an excellent job making it, but the sink cutout was in the wrong space. And I ended up telling the client that I'd remake it. And I remade it, and it was in the wrong space again.
A different wrong space?
Yeah, different wrong space.
I didn't know that you made it wrong twice.
Yeah. And so then I remade it a third time.
It was once.
And so I remade it a third time.
Oh, my Lord.
That's tremendous.
There's nothing quite like going to fit something and not fitting, being like, oh man, I know what I did wrong there. And then making that same mistake again.
And the homeowner was there both times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
Could you tell us what you did wrong? Could you give us can we hear the play-by-play on this one?
I mean, it was a while ago and I blocked out it was just basic layout. I mean, it was just as simple as like not counting numbers properly. You know, like it was the worst mistakes are the stupidest mistakes, right?
So you measured once and cut once.
Yeah, and I was the wrong measurement. Twice. And I just did a shitty job. And it was, I think the first time was an honest mistake, and then the second time you're just living with that mistake and you're cloudy and you...
I can't believe you didn't tell me.
See? We dig out deep secrets in this show.
And so
some call me the Oprah of the Instagram live game. I'm not gonna say who.
On Isaac, and he gave us like an extra check.
Well, we did. We ended up just doing a completely different execution of the project that had. I mean, it was.
We still lost money.
There were.
But
there were issues along the whole way where.
But now it makes more sense why he cut that extra check, because it was such a shit show. He felt bad for you.
Yeah. So, that was that. The final. Oh man. Very nice though.
Well, I look forward to seeing a picture on Instagram.
I don't think I have a picture.
Oh no, it was too long ago.
It wasn't.
Yeah, and I wasn't very proud of that one.
Oh yes, you were scarred.
I just was done.
What does one do with two stainless steel countertops with holes cut in the wrong spot?
They got scrapped.
Scrap?
Yeah. Yep. They were just destined for the scrap bin.
You weren't ready to go into like artistic mode and turn it into. You weren't that RISD of a guy.
No.
To like turn it into a sculpture.
A mobile.
No. We do take home some of the rejects, but only the really nice ones.
Yeah.
You have an unreal collection of metalwork in your house. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
It was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of fun, Zach.
This has been awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
So everybody go check out Whetstone Workshop if you haven't already. at Whetstone Workshop on Instagram. There's an underscore after.
Yeah, and there's an H in there. It's
There's an H in there.
not W-E-T.
What is a whetstone?
A whetstone's a sharpening stone.
Okay.
And so when I started the company, I wanted to do a fair amount of woodworking too. And I wasn't limiting myself to one material in the name. And so it was more about craftsmanship than about a material. And so that's how the name came from.
And before you go, there was our friend Matt Make Stuff there's a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
We don't usually do this, but here we go. Do you know, that's not the question I wanted to put up. He kind of put two of a similar question. I'll just read it. Now, here we go. What would you recommend for a fab company, I'm assuming a fabrication company, wanting to shift to higher end clients and work?
Samples. I mean, I think there needs to be an entire shift of how you approach work, and you need to no longer approach work as making fulfilling a project, and it's more needs to be a thought of greater execution, that you're imparting value into what you're doing with more than just the sum of the materials and the labor. And so, because value comes from the story behind it all, and so what you need to do is create a story and just add extra value beyond your hours, to where people want you, not necessarily the finished object, and that the object is irrelevant and you are more important.
And that's why you guys are going to crush on Instagram, when you take that mentality and you put it out there on social media.
Yes.
Because that is absolute gold, what you just said right there.
Thank you.
We're going to end on that one.
Yes.
All right. Right on.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye,
Have a
Zach.
good one, Zach.
See you later.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.